star bomb, star bomb. So now of course this game is going to be very much, very hard if every time you collect a star it launches a bomb. Welcome back to Arcade. I am Super Tommy, and in this video we're going to look at Phaser 3.50. Now our beginner tutorial here, this is our making your first Phaser 3 game in modern JavaScript, actually works with Phaser 3.50 as is, but we don't have a video of this 5-part tutorial, and we're probably going to do this in 1 or 2 parts. It's relatively simple. It's based on the making your first Phaser 3 game, which is on the phaser.js website. That one is not in modern JavaScript, but with Phaser 3.50 coming out soon here, depending on when you watch this video, it may already be out, but we're going to just show you how to go through this beginner series with Phaser 3.50. There's going to be 1 or 2 things different from this written tutorial that we're going to show you here in this video. There's really not much. Things generally work for most beginner things, including our 2 free ebooks if you haven't gotten them already. If you go to blog.arcade.co, there's the Infinite Jumper in Phaser 3 and Infinite Runner in Phaser 3 with TypeScript. Now these are using Phaser 3.24.1, but they will both work with Phaser 3.50. I've checked that already, and we are going to do a little update for these books for Phaser 3.50, although the code generally works. We'll update the source as well on GitHub. So you can get these books now, and we will let you know when we've updated it. And then after that, we're going to actually do a side scroller series, so if you're interested in that with Phaser 3.50, do subscribe to the Arcade YouTube channel. We're going to do a side scroller series like our Dungeon Crawler series that you see on the channel, or our Pac-Man series. So look forward to that. Right now, we're just going to do a really simple intro to Phaser using Phaser 3.50 Beta 10. Now, if you, let me just bring up the Phaser releases here. So Phaser version 3.50 is in Beta 10, and I believe it should be out towards the end of November here, and by the time you watch this video, it may already be out. There's a bunch of changes, but none really for the beginner stuff. But there are some for tile maps. That's why we're going to do these side scroller series that's going to come out after some of this beginner stuff that we're going to do using Phaser 3.50. So let's actually get started here. We're going to use the Arcade Phaser 3 parcel template. We're going to install it with npm, so we've done that here already. Here is the S code, and we've already installed the project. Or we've downloaded, we've cloned the project. We haven't done npm install, and we haven't upgraded this to use Phaser 3.50 yet. Now, if Phaser 3.50 has come out by the time you watch this video, we will probably have updated the source here to use Phaser 3.50 by default. Now, if you look at package.json here, you're seeing we're currently using Phaser 3.24.1. That is the latest live Phaser as of this video recording. But we want to use Phaser 3.50, so what we're going to do is install Phaser 3.50 Beta 10. Now, if you're looking to install any NPM or any library from NPM, and you want to try their beta versions, you have to do npm install name of the library, and then @beta. Usually, it just depends on the framework or the library you're installing. So let me just show you this link for Phaser's npm page. And normal Phaser install Phaser's npm install Phaser. That gets you the latest active version, which is 3.24.1. Now, if you wanted the other versions, here we are. So latest is the default, so that's 3.24.1. There's also these other alphas, but this is the beta, 3.50 Beta 10. So we just got to install it with this beta tag, and here's how we do that. So here, just ls. So this is a just freshly cloned project or downloaded from GitHub. So now first let's just do npm install phaser at beta. So we're going to get phaser 3.50 beta 10. So let's do that install, and you'll see this gets updated. What you're going to eventually want is just to say 3.50. Now let's do npm install to get the other dependencies. We have some of these here. So we'll just do npm install. Close some of these tabs. Okay. So now this, I'll make myself smaller. So you can read through this series. It goes through how you should set up this project, how this project works set up. We're not going to go through too much of that. We're going to just go through the actual process of creating the code for this project. Now we've got scenes. We've got this hello world scene. This is the starting point. Just smaller. I guess I can close this for now. This is the main.js file. This is where the game starts. And so we have this demo hello world scene. So actually, can I bring back the console? Yes. So let's do npm run start. This is just start the basic demo, which is hello world, and that's just going to be the phaser logo bouncing around. So it's gonna do that. Let's get a tab here to prepare. So it's building. So it's using parcel bundler to build, and it's going to be a localhost 8000. It'll tell you when it's ready, and there it is. So we go to localhost 8000, and there it is. The phaser logo bouncing around. I guess we can make this a little bigger, just to have the whole game in frame. And right there. Okay. So you know this project is working if you bring up the development tools. Go to inspect. I have it on a different. It's undocked. Let me dock it. Let's dock it on bottom. Okay. So you see it's running phaser version 3.50 beta 10. So great. Now let's continue here. So we're going to need a game scene, right? Create a game scene. So let's just make a new file, game scene.js. Now I know most people are probably just going to copy and paste, especially if you're a beginner. You're going to want to just copy and paste, and that's fine, but I really suggest you type it out. I will copy and paste here, but if you are a beginner, do just type it out. Typing it out will help you, even though it seems monotonous, to understand what you're exactly doing. So we import phaser here. This is going to be phaser 3.50. Then we create a game scene based on phaser's scene class. Now a scene just organizes different related parts of your game together. So like a game scene is where all the game stuff is going to be. You could make a title screen scene or a game over scene or something, and all those things that are related can just be together. A UI scene, we've done some of that in other more advanced videos on the Arcade YouTube channel. So then we do this constructor. This is the game scene's class. Every class has a constructor. We're giving it an ID. Every scene needs an ID. If you do not give it one, Phaser will automatically generate one for it, but then you don't know what it is, and then you can't reference it later. So it's better to just give it a scene name. We're calling it game scene. Preload is where you preload your assets, and then create is when we basically are able to create game objects based on the assets we've preloaded. Now loading assets. Now we're going to need to download these assets, so these images, the sky, the ground, from this link. You can just click that link, download that zip, unzip it, and then put it in your project here. So we're going to need to make a public folder. Let's go public, and I'm going to just drag the assets that I've already downloaded earlier. Here it is. Put it into this public folder, copy folder. Alright, so now I'm actually using Mac OS Big Sur, so if you're using an older version of Mac, the exact UI may be a little bit different than what you're looking at here, but generally you want to copy the assets, download it here into a public assets folder. So we're just like this. Now we want to preload the assets, so now you should type this out. but you want to put that into this preload. Right, and we're doing asset/sky. So the public folder, just in this project setup, tells it that we're going to copy all the files in that public folder into the root of where we're serving the files. So that's why we don't need to do public/assets, just assets, because anything in the public folder is considered at root, and that'll just be copied into the root when you run the game. So it's just assets/sky. So if you do, for example, localhost 8000 assets/sky.png. One second, stop this. It's Parcel may not have actually found those static files because there it is. We copied it while it was running, so you may have to stop and rerun npm run start. So here's the sky PNG. It's at root and then assets sky.png. Okay, so that's why we have that. Now we do for the ground, the star, the bomb. These are all assets that we're going to use. Here we're loading a spreadsheet, the dude spreadsheet, which looks like this. Dude. Just like this, and we're going to use each frame for these animations. Right, so just for a test to see, let's just add two images, the sky that we just looked at, and a star. Now if we go here, probably close this. And then, so because we reran, it did not automatically reload, so we just refresh here. Oh, right. Okay, so we need to use our game scene, and this is complaining about mixed spaces and tabs. So in main.js, we're no longer using hello world scenes. Let's just delete this. Instead, we're going to import game scene from scenes game scene, and the scene we're going to use is games. So it's how you, every time you make a new scene, you want to add it to this scene property in the config when you're creating a phaser.game. So this is just the normal bootstrap of more or less any phaser game you're going to make. And now here we are. We have the sky, and here's one star. So fantastic. Now let's go back to our game scene. We can probably delete hello world scene at this point. We don't really need it. So we've created that. That's just a test to make sure everything's working, and it is. So, we talked about that here. I'll also change gravity to 300. Okay. Yep, we talked about all of that. npm run start. Great. So now let's go to part 2 here. We're going to actually do some real stuff. We're going to create some platforms. So the platforms is this ground image that we loaded here. Let's make this create platforms method. So let me just type this out. Create platforms. I know you're going to copy and paste, but you really should type it out. So this .physics.add, we're adding a static group. I can't see VS Code. Static group. Wow. Okay. We're adding a static group. That UI here was not so great. A static group, since grounds don't have to move, so they can just be static as physics objects instead of dynamic, which means they move around and interact with they'll interact with other elements, like bounce off them and move when they get hit by other objects. In this case, we're going to do static because they don't need to move; they're just ground. Ground generally stays where it is. Then we're going to do platforms. So it's a static group. It's a group of platforms. Create. So we can create many objects in a group and then reuse them. So that's why we have this group. Now, of course, we're not really going to reuse them in this case, but using groups is good for cases where you will. And we're making a whole bunch of these grounds anyway, so this is just, it's better to use a group here than to make a whole bunch of platforms that you'll see later when we do collision with these platforms, these ground pieces, that using a group makes it easier to handle the collisions. Right? So, you know, you don't need to watch me type actually. Let's see, I typed it wrong here. Ground. Now, we'll fix that. But typos is a very common thing, and inevitably one is going to have typos. So in here, create, we want to do this dot create platforms. Let's just look at it here, and we got these platforms now, so that's good. Now, talking about typos, you're bound to hit typos yourself, and you've been wondering what is going on, that my stuff is not working, because you didn't notice you spelled ground instead of ground here, and you're like, where's that one ground that I added? So the way to avoid this is to use constants and keys that you type out one time. So we'll put this here at the top of game scene.js, and then everywhere where we have ground, so we can use ground key instead. So you don't have to type ground again. Now you may think you're not going to make typos, and maybe you're a fantastic typer, but one day you will, and you're going to wish you used these const keys or enums if you're using TypeScript, so you don't have to make these typos, because VS Code will tell you that there is no const variable named ground key, and you'll see little squiggly lines telling you there's an error. Now we've got multi-select here in VS Code that just we highlighted ground and then pressed Command D or Control D for Windows, and highlighted everything that matched the thing that we had selected, in this case ground. So just delete that, and we're going to use ground key. So now we just mass replaced everywhere we had ground. Okay. Now this should still work. Let's just double check. Let's manually refresh. Still good. Let's actually delete this star. Alright, cool. Now let's make a player. Now, while we're here, we're already going to start using const keys, so let's just do another one for dude. We're going to replace dude here with dude key. Alright, so in this guide we're using, we're setting class properties in the constructor, which is fine. You don't even actually need to do this, and I think we talk about that somewhere in this article here, do we? Yeah, it's not strictly necessary. But also in the Phaser 3 parcel template from the Arcade GitHub, we also have it set up for class fields to use class properties. So for example, you can do this, and then give it a type here using JSDoc, like whatever you think this is going to be, but we're going to keep it simple here. In other videos you'll see us doing this, but just for this case we're going to keep it simple. We're not even going to bother doing this in the constructor. You can, but you do not need to, and we'll show you why you don't need to, because in JavaScript it'll just automatically add that wherever you do this dot any sort of class property name, it'll create that for you. So this is the create player method. This just makes the player a sprite here, a physics sprite, an arcade physics sprite, using the dude key, and puts it at this position, sets the bounce. Let me just copy this here. You should type it out, and then we're going to make animations. So this animation creating makes a new animation called left. When we're going to be walking left, we're going to use this animation. It's going to use frames. We're going to use this generate frame numbers just to help us, but it's using the dude key, which is to tell us the dude texture, which is this image that we showed earlier. This is the dude texture. That's what the dude key points to. And that happened because we in preload said dude key, this should be for this sprite sheet at this image. And this is the data for this sprite sheet, which means that 32 pixels wide by 48 pixels tall for each frame in the sprite sheet. I think there was like 8 or something like that. And so each one is 32 by 48. And we're going to do two other animations, one called turn and one called right. I think this is going to be used for idle. But basically when it's facing straight at you, it's this guy. So I guess there's 9 frames. Okay, so which is frame 4 here, and it starts from 0 to 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Frame rate is 20 here. I guess it doesn't really matter. There's only one frame. This could be 0, I think, and it wouldn't matter. but 10 here for the framework for the walk left and walk right, right? So that just tells it, instead of doing an array of four objects like this defining each frame, this is a helper generate frame numbers to help you based on a start and end. It'll just basically create them all for you, just like this. The result of this method is an array with 4 objects defining each frame for the animation. Okay, now we set bounds to 0.2 so that when it lands on the floor it'll just bounce up, and then collide world bounds means that it won't go past the window. That's the world bounds of the world. Okay, so now let's save, and we need to actually call create player here. We do create platforms. This dot create player. Now let's check it out. Oh, here it is. Now there's no movement. I'm pressing keyboard, nothing's happening. We haven't added it. There's no collision with the platforms. There is collision with the world, right? So the world bounds is the screen, basically, and it's not falling through the world. So that's good. Our collide world bounds is working. All right, let's next here, part 3. Click. Part 3. Now we're going to add colliders to collide with the platforms here, because you've got floors. Let's walk on them. So we're adding this player class property so that we can reference it somewhere else, and that somewhere else is where? Not clear yet. I'm sure we talked about, oh yes, when we do keyboard controls, we're going to need it in the update. All right, so let's just go here. The change that we're making is we're going to output platforms out of this create platform. So let's go here. So we made this platforms, but we can't access it if we don't return it out of a function or a method. Now you may see in some other examples not using modern JavaScript where you declare your variables on the top of the file, for example, and then set them in a function, and you can call them anywhere. Those are called global variables. We're not going to use that here. We're using class properties and or local variables. You don't want global simply because you may forget you made it global and then override it, and then not know what happened. You're like, well, what happened? I don't know. It creates more bugs for you if you create a line global, since it's hard to keep track of them and you may accidentally overwrite them. So this is a const platforms that's local to this method. Now we're just going to return it since we made platforms. We're going to return it. Then we're going to use it over here, and we're going to put whatever was returned by create platforms, in this case a static group, right? This static group that we made here, and put it into this other local variable inside create. So now this platform and this platforms are 2 different variables. They point at the same thing, but they're 2 different variables. You can name this differently just to make it clear, but they're 2 different variables in a different scope. This is in this create method scope. This is in the create platform scope. Now we're going to do the same for create player. Instead of setting it, now we could this would just work just fine, right? If we didn't do this, this is still good. But for clarity, since we're returning things out of the other one, let's just do that. And then just return the player when we say create player, instead of setting the class property. So nothing inherently wrong with setting the class property from this method, but just for consistency, since create platforms returns a platform, then create player should return a player. And so we do this dot player, and then we want this collider, and let's just copy that. Maybe I could have typed that faster than copying. All right, so it's reloaded. Okay, so there it is. Now our dude is standing on a floor. We're making progress here. Okay. This all stays the same. This just changed from a class property, this dot player, to a local method variable, const player. Okay, keyboard controls. So again, this is not strictly necessary to set it as undefined. It may actually be stupid, but you could actually type it. That would be where it helps. If you wanted to see all the accessible class properties in one spot at the top, in languages like Java, C++, C#, many traditional object-oriented languages, you would declare all your class properties in the class field area up here, so that you can see quickly what you can access throughout this class, or what maybe public can access outside of this class. Okay, so we're not going to do this. We're just going to do this dot cursors, this dot input dot create cursor key. This will create us. This will create a set of cursors, the arrow keys, and I think the space key. Just a easy way to get all those 4 keys, since that's commonly used for moving around. So this is the update method. I'm going to copy this. You should type it out. And we're going to put it right after create. Okay, actually we don't need this terminal. Let's close that. So this is the update method. So what happens in this update method is we're going to check if the left key is down, the right key is down, and then move left or right depending on whether those keys are down. And if not left or right is down, we're going to just set our velocity x to 0, so we stop moving. Then we go to the turn animation, which is when he's facing you. And this is jump if we're pressing up and the body is touching the ground or something below it. We're going to go up minus 330 pixels on y velocity. So let's save that. That should work. So let's run, jump. All right, pretty good. All right. Okay, so that's that coming up. All right, next, part 4. Come on, click. All right, part 4, we're gonna do some stars. Okay, we need something to collect in this very simple game. So we're gonna add some stars to collect. So let's see here, again, star key, we're doing this so that we can avoid typos. And if you were to change this key for some reason, oh, I guess we did, okay. If we have to change this key for some reason, you can only change it in one place. And then everywhere that uses this star key, it'll just work. Okay, star key. That's good, star, okay, we did that. Okay, create stars. Let's just do this. What are we doing here? I'm gonna copy it, paste this. You should type it out. Trust me, you do a lot better learning typing it out than just copy and pasting. So what we're doing here, and use this arrow here, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna create a physics group. This is not a static group. Now, last time we did a static group in here in platforms. This is just a normal group that's gonna produce this dynamic arcade physics sprites with dynamic bodies. So they'll bounce around and they'll hit each other if we want it, but they're going to hit the floor and bounce off the floor. We're going to add colliders for the star and the floor. And now we're using the star key, which is the star texture. We're going to make this 12 of them. So we're going to make one and then repeat 11 times. And for each repeat, we're going to start at this XY and then step X is for each new star you make, add 70 to X. That's what this means. And so now we have this error here. Here we're going through all the created stars. There should be 12, I'm pretty sure. Go through each of the stars. So each star is a children of the star group. Since we made the star in the group, each star is a child of that star group. We're going to go through each child and then set their bounce y value to a random number, random float between 0.4 and 0.8. Now we see this error. If you're not using VS Code, you may not see this error. Or if you're not using this specific phaser 3 parcel template from the arcade GitHub, you may not see this error. But what's happening here is child is given as a game object from this iterate method. But game object doesn't actually have a set bounce y. This method is on a it's on an arcade physics sprite. Now what you're actually getting here is an arcade physics sprite, but the typings given to iterate doesn't actually know exactly what it is. It's just due to how the phaser code is structured. But we know we're making a physics group here, and we know we're getting arcade sprites. So what we can do, let's do this. We're going to make our own. We're going to set this incoming argument to C. right? So this is the child, we call it C. Then we're going to make another local variable here, child. And what we're going to do is cast the C variable to a arcade physics sprite, since we know that is what it is. Now we can do that cast in JavaScript here using JSDoc. This is type phaser.physics. Nope, phaser. I had Siri come up on my phone. Okay, phaser.physics. .arcade. Okay, let me type this outside. It seems to not. So in some cases, you may have seen us do this actually. .arcade. Physics. Oh man, physics.arcade. .sprite. Right, but this is not quite going to work, even though we're saying child is a physics arcade sprite, an arcade physics sprite. I think this updated versions of VS Code doesn't let you do that. It does some better type checking. So now, instead, we're going to do a more complicated cast, and there we go. So you may see this problem in some other projects or code you're working in, and this will do. This is a JSDoc typecast, and that'll tell it to make this phaser.gameObjects.gameObject type into a phaser.physics.arcade.sprite type, because we know that's what it is. And if you mouse over here, now we have the right type. This method is found on that type. So there we go. So that's create stars. And then we want to go up here to use create stars, const stars, this dot create stars. And we're returning the stars out from this method just to keep things consistent here. And that's stars. Now we want to add a collider between the platform, so the ground and the stars. Now let's give it a look here. And the stars come off and then they hit the ground. They bounce at different bounce values. That's what this random is. Right? We give each one a different bounce value, so they bounce a little bit differently. All right, now let's do collecting stars. So when we collect a star, we're going to use overlap instead of collide. You could use collide, this add the collider here as well. The effect may be a little bit different. So you're going to use overlap, because we don't want to actually push the stars if we collide. We may actually push them. So we're going to use overlap. So let's just add this, and then we're going to make the method we need afterwards. So create, you should type it out. I know some of you are not going to type it out. That's okay, but you will learn a lot better if you type it out. Now collect star. Let's put this let's put it under update. Okay, player star. So this dot collect star. So what this is doing is detect an overlap between the player and any star in the stars group. If that happens, call collect star. I think this is the on process. We don't need any extra checking to know if a overlap has happened. And then this is the scope. Don't worry about it too much for now if you're a beginner. We have a video on JavaScript context and scopes to explain better what's going on here. Just know, by and large, in this entire project, you're always going to use this. And if you're using classes, you're usually going to use this, usually. Okay, so that's this overlap. And when that happens, when collect star will be called when the player overlaps any star. And when that happens, we do a disable body on the star. Make sure that's saved. Boom, collected. And collected, so that's working. Right, talk about scopes here. And there's a video here. You can go to this blog series and check that out. Okay, so disabling the body will basically make the star disappear. Now let's keep track. So we're going to do a score label here. Right, so we're going to put this in source UI score label. So let's go to the source folder, make a new folder called UI. Then we're going to make a new class called a new file, scorelabel.js. Now you should type this, but I'm going to copy just to make it easier or make this video a little less monotonous with a little typing. So type out create your score label class here. This is a function that is local to this file, so you can't use format score anywhere else. It only works inside this file. Now we could put format score into this class. That's somewhat up to personal taste here. In this example, we did put it as a function in this scorelabel.js file, so it can only be accessed by the scorelabel class. Okay, and all it does is say score colon the actual score passed in here. So this could be rewritten as this, and maybe that's better, less shortcuts. Right, this could be rewritten as that, which means we're passing in a score to format score. Then we're going to create a string and then return that string out. And this is string interpolation in modern JavaScript. This can also be rewritten. Score colon plus score. Right, that can be rewritten as that, but it's probably a little bit nicer using string interpolation of modern JavaScript. So let's do that. Okay, the rest of this is relatively simple. Setting a score just sets the whatever value we want, and then updates the score text so that it keeps the formatting. And then add points will add whatever given points to our starting score value here, or whatever the current score value is, and then it'll also update, so this is called set score. Does the set text on our label. And now we are extending phaser.gameObjects.text, and that's how you just simply get text on the screen. So this score label is of type phaser.gameObjects.text, and this is the constructor, similar to the scene game scene that we did. We're inheriting a existing phaser class, so we need to call super here and give it all the stuff that the normal phaser.gameObjects.text expects, which is the scene it's being created in, where it should be XY, the actual string to show in that label or that text, and then any text style. So this could be, you don't need to pass this in if you don't have any styles. Okay, so this is our score label class. Now we're going to use it here, so let's import our score label class, right? So import score label from UI score label. And we don't need to do this. This is optional. And we're going to create a score label here in create. We're going to put it at 1616. It's going to be the top left here. Create score label here. Now let's add this create score label. I guess we're going to add to the bottom. Alright, so create score label takes an XY and then some sort of score value. Now we're using style here, making the font size 32 pixels, and fill is, this is 00 is no color, so I think black, or very close to black. So this is making a new score label, passing in the values. This, it wants the scene, like we saw earlier, so it's going to be this. Then we add it to our scene. Alrighty, that's that. Okay, now, so let me just make sure that should all be working. Let's go here. And we have score. Now, of course, if we collect something, nothing should happen since we didn't add that logic. We have that add points method in the score label. And do we not do that in this? We don't. Okay, next point. Oh no, do something. Here we go. When we collect star, we want to add 10 points. So let's go to our collect star method. And each time we collect the star, add 10 points. Points, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Okay, so that's working. Now we have one more part here. We're going to wrap this up shortly by dropping some bombs. So let's make a bomb spawner here. Let's go here. I think we made the bomb spawner just in scene. So let's make a new file. We'll call it bombspawner.js. Now I'm going to copy this, but I do recommend typing it out. I'm going to explain what we're doing here. So this bomb spawner doesn't extend any phaser class. It's a class by itself. And it takes in the scene and then the key denoting what the bomb texture is. And we store all that as class properties here. Then we create a group, very similar to how we made groups outside of this class in the game scene. And what this class does is simply wrap some of that logic so that all you got to do if you want a bomb is call this.spawn, given an x, given the player's x, is going to decide where to put that bomb. And so just simple logic here, if the player is less than half screen, that's 400, the whole thing is 800, then we're going to pick some value between 400 and 800. So this is a ternary, or a shortcut for an if statement. So we could have done it this way too. So let's just say, we by default will pick some value between 0 and 400, but if player x is greater than, if less than 400, placed on the left side of the screen, we are going to instead pick a number between 400 and 800 just to give him some sort of fighting chance. If he's on the left side, spawn on the right side so that we're not spawning where the player is. So now this is roughly the same as this. This is a one-liner instead of, I guess, 4 lines, and you can use const on the x. Oh no, this is not totally right. It's x equals. Like this is the same. So if this line here and these 4 lines here accomplish the same task, which is using a shortcut for an if-else called the ternary operator, this question mark, and then this colon here. So just know that that is the same if you're not familiar with the ternary operator or the shortcut for if-else. Okay. Now we, in this group, create a bomb. It's always at y16, and this x that we decide based on where the player x is using the bomb key. We set a bounce of 1, collides world bounds, true, just like the player, so it bounces around the world. Then we give it a velocity of minus 200, 200. And, velocity with a number, an x value from between minus 200 and 200, and then a y value of 20. So it's going to always go down, and then either left or right, minus 200, 200, could also be 0, so that you have some variety of what direction the bomb starts at. That's our bomb spawner. Now we're going to use it in the game scene. So we've got to import it just like our square label, but we can just import it at the relative current directory since that's where we added the file, right? We're in game scene. Here's game scene, here's bomb spawner. They're in the same folder, so we're going to do /. Need to make a new bomb key. Bomb key. We don't need to do this. And now let's change bomb key. Now surely you can do this for Sky as well, but Sky's only used, I guess, 2 places here. You could still do it for the Sky key. I don't think we do it in this tutorial. Now let's make a new bomb spawner. You see, we didn't do a this step create bomb spawner, and because it's so simple, we just don't need to. You still could if you wanted to, but it's not strictly necessary since it seems so simple. This stack create score is similarly simple, but there's a bit of styling that we're doing here, and then you got to add it to the scene. So there's a few more lines. So we did this create score label, and for these other ones, just there are more complex methods. Versus this is simply a one-liner. If we made this a method, it would just be return new bomb spawner. Doesn't seem necessary. All right, so there's that. Now let's use this bomb spawner. In order to do that, we need to handle collisions between the bomb and the player. And Okay, so I think we're doing this dot stars. It's because we need to use the stars later. But what the bomb spawner is going to do is expose a group right here, right? And we need to do a collision between the player and the bomb spawner group. So that's what this is. We'll go back to stars. That's the group. And then we're going to do this dot overlap between this. Oh, right. Because we will change to this dot stars. All right, but let's just do this bombs group and platforms, and so that's going to bounce on the platforms. So where are we doing? Okay, that's the game over. Okay, I got ahead of myself. Okay, and collect star here. So what we're doing here actually is making the bombs bounce off the platforms. Okay, fair. And we're adding this dot stars as a class property to access it in the collect star. So what we have here is each time you collect a star, we're going to spawn a new bomb. You could make it each time you collect all the stars, you spawn a bomb, and we'll show you how to do that. So let's do this dot stars instead of const stars. Make the stars a class property. This dot stars and this dot stars. Okay. And then I'm going to add this. So this specific example, as I'm going to copy it here in collect star, we'll add a new bomb each time you collect the star. So that makes the game quite hard. And so we have this same issue again, and the problem is the same as what we talked about earlier. So let's just copy this here. We're going to cast the incoming child, which is the game object, into a arcade physics sprite. If you know that's what it is. And so that's good. And so if all the stars, if there are no active stars, what this does is go ask the stars group, count all the active stars. That's what true means. If that is 0, that means there's no active stars. We're going to respawn the stars, basically. I'm going to re-show the stars. And then each time we collect a star, set a new bomb, or spawn a new bomb. And let's go here. Collect star, bomb. Collect star, bomb. So now, of course, this game is going to be very hard if every time you collect a star, it launches a bomb. If you want to make it a little easier, you can remove this bomb spawner to only spawn a bomb every time you collect all 12 stars. Right, so let's see. This should work. 4 more stars. I'm gonna make it, yes. And there's 1 bomb. But I think it's more fun with more bombs. Okay, so there's that. So now that's spawning a bomb when you collect stars. Now the last thing here is if the player hits the bomb, now nothing's going to happen now. I think we can try to get this bomb to hit. Come on. No. You know what? Just take my word for it that if you, right now, there we go. Nothing happened when the bomb hit you. Watch when we try to do next time to avoid the bomb is going to be much harder. Just now couldn't even hit the bomb if we wanted to. Okay, so this game over, we're going to set a class property here as this flag to note when the game is over. We can add this in the constructor and set it to false to start, since the game is not over to start. And then here we're going to add this collider between the player and the bombs. And I recommend you type it out. So there it is. We need this hit bomb method, and we're going to make that. And now in update, we're going to make this change where if it is game over, we're just going to not update, so you can't move. Okay, and then hit bomb. So in hit bomb, we actually don't need this because we're not using this, but we're going to get the 2 game object.collided, we're just going to comment this out. If you do want it, you can just leave that uncommented and use the bomb game object. So what we do when we hit a bomb, that means the game is over. We're going to pause physics so that no more physics needs to run. We're going to tint ourselves red, a reddish tint, actually all red here. And then we're going to set ourselves to face the screen and set game over to true. So it's sort of like in Super Mario Brothers when Mario dies, except in this one we don't do the fall off screen part. So alright, let's see. Yeah, I can get hit more easily. There we go. Now we turn red and we face the screen and the game is now over, everything stops. Because we had set physics to pause, so everything has stopped moving. And that's it. So that was using Phaser 3.50. Now we're using the beta 10 version, that may be the last one, unless there's some more bugs that the Phaser team are working on that may be resolved in another release. But otherwise, Phaser 3.50 should be coming out soon, or may already be out depending on when you watch this video. So this is the beginner's guide, or this was the beginner's guide to using Phaser 3.50 to make the game. This is the getting started guide. Now if you like this video, do hit like. And now for more videos using Phaser 3.50, do subscribe to this channel. We have a side-scroller series planned using Phaser 3.50. There are changes to the tile map API in Phaser 3.50. So we find that to be useful to help you guys with. So we're going to do a side-scroller series. Now our dungeon crawler series may be broken with Phaser 3.50. Actually, probably will be, since the tile map changes are fairly large and some classes no longer exist. So if you want an update to that, do let us know in the comments below, or any other series we've done. If you see that it actually doesn't work in 3.50, or you want an updated version, let us know in the comments below, and subscribe for more videos on making games with Phaser 3.50.